like essentially, what your brand is about is marketing yourself and putting yourself out there as a product in a competitive world. And we'll talk about how brands, I suppose, generally, compete in a competitive world. The other thing to think about as well is that your brand also has benefits for your employer. So again, not to forget that. So if you're looking for time to develop your brand, to get involved in activities outside of the organization, it does have benefits for the employer as well. So don't be afraid to mention that in terms of that brand and the benefits of it to your employer also. So your brand, if we were to look at this and what is it, and to help you to kind of understand this further, it's about how you see yourself, but also then how others see you. And it's that piece in the middle then that forms your personal brand, because you will have an impact in terms of how you present your brand as well, and your own self-awareness and self-belief and confidence in yourself, and how you then present that to the outside world, and also then how others see you in the workplace. So what is it that others say about you? What are you known for? What will people say about your style of work? Are you known as the person that comes to the meetings with the solutions? What is your approach, your attitude, your leadership and management style, for example? So you do need to think about these things in the context of how you see yourself, but also then as well how others see you. And as I said, that personal brand then is a culmination or a crossover of those two elements. So I like this particular expression because I think it's a good way of really thinking it through. And this is what Jeff Bezos said, who's the founder of Amazon. He said that your personal brand is what people say about you when you leave the room. Now, we've all been in those situations where, people have left the room and there's a conversation that goes on around it or after the meeting. So you need to be mindful and step into the shoes of those people in the meetings with you, or where you've met somebody at an event, for example, is to think about what are people saying about you when you leave the room, and what is it that you want them to say. So that's certainly, I think it's a good way of thinking about this. So as I was saying, you need to think of yourself in terms of a brand, and I've put up here I suppose an image of the various different brands that we all know in the world, and brands that have been invested in and that have built up over many years, and they're not brands by accident. Obviously, a lot of investment and time, as I said, has gone into this. So you need to approach your brand and your I suppose personal brand with the same I suppose approach in terms of that focus, and continuously working on that. And I think that's a good way to think about that in terms of the amount of time, investment, the benefit then as a result of that. But as I said, these things don't just happen by accident. They are invested in, they are managed, and they're continuously reassessed. But don't forget, if you do have any questions, just to let me know as we go through the webinar this afternoon. So what are the benefits of a personal brand? Because you might say to me, look, why would I do this? What's the point? And it's basically raising your awareness around the impression that you create. As we said, it's controlling that impression, it's controlling what people are saying about you. It's you taking control of that and not others. So you're firmly in the driving seat of your personal brand. You're controlling what's being said, and you're aware of the impression that you're making, and you're sending very clear messages around that, and being conscious of what it is that you're saying. Also, if you have this awareness of the impression that you're creating, you might become aware of ways in which you can change that, improve it, and increase your visibility and exposure, so that you can go about that to make changes and improve the visibility as well. It also provides you with clarity in relation to your career path. your career path, and aligning that with the career path for success. So in other words, if you know exactly where you're going, you can align your brand with that particular career direction. So as I said, then it's looking at where your career path is, where you want to go, and then aligning your personal brand to that particular path or direction that you want to go, so that you're sending the right messages that will help you in terms of your career path. So in other words, you're taking control, you're in the driving seat. It's part of your overall career strategy, your overall career plan. You're looking at what your objectives are. You're setting a goal for yourself in terms of, you know, that the image you want to present, what you want to get from this, how this aligns with your own personal goals. Now, what's really important here is your target audience. So you need to think about it in terms of who is it that you're trying to get this message out to. So you need to look at it in terms of your current organization, so the decision makers within the organization, you know, the people that you report to, the line above that obviously is really, really important, but also the target audience outside of that as well. So is there a particular sector or area that you're operating in, and is there you know, I suppose a space within that which you want to be recognized in. So it's really important to think about that, and then to I suppose take control of that message and making sure that that message is getting to the right audience, and then considering, as I said, the impression that you want to create. What is it that you want this audience to think about when they hear your name? You know, how is it that you then want to be remembered? So getting started. So you might say, well, look, where is this all going and how do I go about this? Well, I'm going to take you through a couple of key steps that will help you along the way to setting up your own brand and zoning in on the key areas in relation to your brand. So I think it's interesting to start with the brand of somebody you might admire. So that person could be somebody that's working in your own organization. It could be somebody that, you know, is working within the same sector as you, or indeed it could be an icon from the business world, the sporting world, the political world. So or a mentor or a manager that you respect. So essentially somebody that you respect, you admire, and look at that and say, well, look, you know, from the perspective of their brand, what is it that I admire about it? What is it that, you know, or how would I like my brand to kind of emulate that or look like that? And what do you want your brand to look like, or what do you want it to be? So in other words, like, what do you want people to associate with you? Then you look at your strengths or your attributes, and what would you like people to use, like to say, or what, you know, strengths and attributes would you like to be associated with? So in other words, if people were to say, well, look, I met with Karen recently, you know, what skills and attributes is it that you'd like them to say, look, that, you know, I have very strong communication skills. She's a real people person. So it's really to think about what those strengths and attributes are that relate to you, and to give that some thought. Now, on a slide that's coming up, I have identified some of what those strengths and attributes could look like. But if you're not sure in terms of what they are, well, then there are ways of doing that. You can look, you know, for feedback from your peers, from your colleagues. You could also look at some of the psychometric tests that you do online. We also do some testing here where we help members to identify their strengths and attributes. And there's a whole range of tests online that you can go in and look at that. But I think it's really good to ask others for feedback and to get that independent feedback in terms of what the strengths and attributes are that you have to bring. You also then need to look at, you know, what is it that you can start doing that will help you to kind of manage the perceptions that others have of you, and what is it that you need to stop doing. So, for example, like if you were to look at what you need to start doing, it could be, you know, raising your profile, for example, on LinkedIn. You know, do you need to be getting out and meeting with more people? Do you need to be networking more? Do you need to find your voice in work and let people know what it is that you've been involved in and the great work that you're doing in your current position? Like, when was the last time you spoke to your manager and said, look, I'm really proud of myself because I did this, you know? And also then to look at, what is it that you can stop doing? And that can take the form of, in terms of looking at, the voices that or the messages that you're sending to yourself in terms of self-confidence. Could it be that you keep saying to yourself, look, I'm too busy to go to those networking events, or look, I won't say anything to my manager because they don't listen. So it's looking at those behaviors and those patterns and things that you're doing yourself, and look at it and say, right, well, what can I start doing that will help me to create a better brand and to get my brand out there? And what is it that I need to stop doing? I need to be more open in terms of approaching my personal brand. So I have taken I suppose a range of pictures here of a number of kind of high profile personalities from the political world, from the sporting world, from the business world. And I think it's good for us to take a look at some of the personalities involved, and ask ourselves, when we look at each of those individuals, like, what is the brand that they present or represent to us? So in other words, when we look at their pictures, or if we hear about them in the news, or we're watching them on the TV, what is the impression that they're creating? How are they creating that impression? What would we think of when we see these particular individuals? What are the words that come to mind for you? And which of those, if any, are I suppose, brands or personalities that you would look up to? And what is it about those personalities that resonate with you? So I think it's a really good thing to do. You can also bring this closer to home and look at it from the perspective of people that you work with. People within your own network, maybe a high profile CEO, managing director, and look at it and say, well, what is it about their personal brand that speaks to me? What aspects of their personal brand would I like to emulate? And I think it's a really good thing to do, and to look at it and say, right, well, what is it about their brand that speaks to me, and why? So what is it? Is it the way they speak? Is it their approach? Is it their style? Is it their presentation? So think about that in terms of the impact that they have on you, why they have that impact on you, and how they're making that impact. Because obviously there's a number of elements to a personal brand, which I'll speak to you about shortly, but you need to think about that in terms of the impact that it's having and why. But don't forget, any questions, just pop them in, and I'd be very happy to deal with those questions. So a lot of people would ask me in terms of, how do I go about creating a personal brand? Because, it can be very difficult to know where to start. But I have a couple of steps here that I'll take you through that will help you to follow those steps and break it down, and hopefully at the end of it have that overarching personal statement that you can use. Now, it's a bit like a CV. It's one of those things that's always a work in progress. So there's nothing to say that you can't add to it, tweak it, and experiment with it, as I said, and refine it as well, because you will, go away from it and come back maybe with a different perspective. So it will take a bit of time, a bit of work to get through it. But what I would say is, start with an overarching statement. And what I mean by that could be something like, that you're a commercially minded chartered accountant. So it's something as broad as that, which is that overarching statement relating to your personal brand. Then what you do is you add one or two of your personal strengths. So you could look at those kind of personal strengths and decide what those are, add those to it. So for example, then you'll end up with a statement like a commercial chartered accountant with a strong focus on achieving business goals. So it's like, again, so we've focused on those strengths. You can add an additional one in there if you want. And then, as I've mentioned there, it's looking at your unique selling points and what you might specifically want to highlight in terms of your skill set that you have that maybe others aren't as likely to have. And again, I'll talk to you about the unique selling points at a later stage, just to go into those in a little bit more detail. But now what you want to do then is add a little bit of color, make it a little bit more interesting, because where a lot of people fall down with these statements, and the same with their profiles on their CV, is that they make them too generic. So you need to add something personal in there that really speaks to what your specific skills are, and that you can use then to strengthen your personal brand statement. So from this then, if we use that example that I had there a few minutes ago, if we said a commercial chartered accountant with a strong focus on achieving business goals, you might then add, I use my communication and strategy skills to drive commercial results. So you're showing, giving that overall statement in terms of who you are and your brand. You're highlighting one or two key strengths in terms of what you have to bring to the table and is part of your overall personal brand. But you're also then, making a statement in relation to how that benefits others, and that then in turn strengthens your personal brand. Now, as I said, you will need to play around with this a little bit and experiment, refine it, come back to it, ask others for feedback as well, and don't be afraid to look at other profiles or brands. LinkedIn can be a really good source of examples for that. So I've given just flick forward here, an example in terms of another brand message, and I just used my own profile for this. So what I've put here is, I'm a qualified executive career coach, and I use my coaching and listening skills to empower members to set and achieve their career goals. With over 20 years experience working with finance professionals, I have a unique understanding of the career paths open to them and how they can best achieve career success. So this here gives whoever's reading this a good overview of the skills and experience that I can bring to a role or organization. It gives a flavor of my own specific unique skill set, and also then what it is that I'm about myself, what I look to achieve, and it gives a good sense of me, what motivates me, and people would have a good sense of what I do, where my skills lie. And also as well, I can stand over this from like an authentic perspective. Like it works because it can be used in a written format on a CV, but also as well we can actually put that in a simple I suppose format. If I'm out meeting somebody, for example, that I could explain that quite easily, and what you want is that it flows easily, you're comfortable with it, and that's what I mean about it being authentic, that it is a true reflection of your skills, your values, your strengths, and that you would feel comfortable explaining this to somebody if you met them at a networking evening, for example, or if you were putting this on your CV, that again you feel comfortable, you can stand over this, and that it is an authentic representation of you. Because the idea about this is that you're comfortable putting this out there, and that it works for you, because it's not always an easy I suppose task to go out and kind of market or promote or push your brand out there. So you do need to be mindful of that. So I said I'd mention some examples around kind of identifying your strengths and values, and this is something I just picked up from the internet. So it is easily accessible, and you can find it, because sometimes we all need a bit of inspiration in terms of coming up and identifying those strengths and values. So it is a good idea to invest some time in reading through examples and establishing then what it is that really resonates with you. So if you're reading down through these, there'll be some that jump out directly that as being skills that you identify as being directly associated with you. And then if you can think of examples of where you've demonstrated and how you've demonstrated these skills, either in a work context or a personal context, then that you can stand over these, and that you're comfortable using these then in any personal brand statement that you might have. So the next part of this, so we've looked at, what is a personal brand. We've looked at the benefits of a personal brand. We've looked at, I suppose, creating that personal brand. And now we're going to look at managing that brand, because it's not enough just to create it. You do need to manage that and making sure that you're getting the most from the brand, because it is an important part of your professional and personal, I suppose, self as such. So it is important that you're managing that. So there's 5 key elements that I'll take you through in a little bit more detail. The first of those is around perception. The second part is around visibility, or some people would like to refer to it more as exposure. The other part then is your uniqueness and your unique selling points, or the USPs, as I've mentioned there. Your presentation, or others would call it packaging, but in other words, it's kind of how you present yourself. And then lastly, is around your relationships, and also then within that is your professional network, because that is going to be fundamental in terms of having that brand, because there's no point in having a really good brand if you're not getting that out there and you don't have the network in which to promote that particular brand and to get it out there. So the first part is around kind of perception, and you've all heard that expression, that perception is reality. And I suppose I find this really interesting in terms of the awareness gap, that we judge ourselves by our own intentions and what we plan to do and intend to do, but we judge others by their impact. So we need to be mindful of that in terms of how we're judging ourselves, but also then how we're judging others. So as I mentioned to you earlier in the other slide, when you're looking at our personal brand, we need to look at it from the perspective of how we perceive our brand, and then how others perceive our brand, and the crossover of the two. So let me just talk to you about that in a little bit more detail, because it can be, I suppose, take a while for it to I suppose, kind of, for people to understand it. So there's 2 elements to your branding. We've got the hardcore element of it, which is education, skills, experience, and in a lot of ways that is the piece that people find easier to work on, particularly if you've got a good education and you have a qualification. You've started to make inroads in your career in terms of building on skills. The more difficult part can be the softer side. So it's around your verbal and visual identity. So your reputation and that impression that you're trying to create. So I think for a lot of people, it's the softer side of things that they really need to be worrying about and working on, and looking at the reputation, the impression that they're making. And a good example of this in terms of perception is in relation to perception kind of influencing decisions. So in other words, if you're looking to purchase a particular product, be it a car or a laptop, what you do find is that brand will often influence the decisions that are made in that respect. You could have 2 products that are fairly similar, but because one brand speaks to you as being a better brand, or because there's more of a brand associated with that particular product, we tend to buy those particular products. So what we would say there is that kind of brands win over products. So that's why you need to think of yourself as a brand, because you're more likely to be able to kind of influence the decisions that people make, and those decisions that are made will then have an influence on your career. So it's thinking about that impression, the reputation, the verbal and the visual identity. So as I said, that softer branding. So moving on from there, then we just want to talk a little bit around the visibility and exposure. And in career terms, this is the piece that many forget about, and there's a lot of research has shown that people think that in terms of career progression, that it's often our performance in a role that is what is going to take us forward. But research has shown increasingly that as you move forward in your career, it's not necessarily about performance per se. It's more about the exposure and visibility that you get, and also your image. So there's research that has been compiled into a chart, which is really very interesting, that shows that 10% of your career success is down to performance. 60% is down to your visibility and exposure, and 30% is down to your image. So, that's why I'm saying here, being good at your job doesn't necessarily guarantee your success. People need to know about that success. They need to know what it is you're doing. They need to know about the skills, the experience, the attributes, the qualities that you have. And then that's where the personal brand comes in, and that process of personal branding that helps you to get that message out there, and that will help you then in terms of moving your career forward and getting those opportunities and being recognized for the good job that you're doing. So it is important that we don't hide our light under a bushel, as it were, that we do tell people about the good job that we're doing. So I thought it would be good just to kind of give a couple of examples here, and just to talk this through in a little bit more detail. So it's looking at how you can generate ways to increase your visibility and exposure. So it's thinking more strategically around the meetings that you're attending. Take the opportunity to actually speak about the work that you're doing, being more vocal in meetings, contributing more. And making sure that your voice is being heard. Looking for opportunities, to maybe present to different decision makers, present at a meeting, present at a board. So again, things that will give you that exposure and that visibility. Networking obviously is really important, so that you're not just looking at that audience, as we referred to them earlier, internally. You are also looking at ways in which you can network and make sure that more people outside of your organization, but within, I suppose, your wider network, know about what it is you do and what it is you have to offer. So also then looking at ways in which you can promote the skills and the qualities and the work that you do. So whether that's through social media, so the likes of LinkedIn, Twitter, and I suppose even just commenting on certain topics that come up on social media, sharing articles and topics that have been posted by other people, just to get that visibility out there, that people see you as somebody who operates in this space. You could even share your own thoughts or views or articles on the likes of LinkedIn or other various social media channels. And again, networking, as I mentioned, a really good way of letting people know what it is you do. And then you need to look how can you bring those skills to life. So you might have skills that you haven't had a chance to use in the marketplace and that people aren't aware of, or in the workplace. So the opportunity to volunteer for new projects is always one to look at. Also to make sure that your manager is aware that you're looking for that promotion, and that you're having those conversations and putting yourself out there, and that you have that visibility and that exposure, and that people are aware of the skills, they're aware of your ambitions, and that you're communicating that in a way that will support and promote your personal brand. So it's more about visibility rather than ability, often, is what is going to lead to career success. So I would ask you to kind of ponder that somewhat more, and to think about how you can get that visibility, how you can get that exposure, and then making sure then that the personal branding message that you're bringing to the equation is one that will benefit you and will do you justice. So uniqueness then is important, and to think about how you will differentiate your brand from others, because you don't want to just kind of blend into the background of others. So you need to look at what it is that makes you different. What skills, attributes and experience do you have that maybe others don't have? Now, sometimes people can find this difficult to identify what those attributes are, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a particular attribute. It could be a combination of skills together that make you unique and make you different from your peers. It could be the combination of experience. It could be the combination of, you know, a number of different career paths or backgrounds that would make you different from your peers. But essentially what you want to do is to see what it is that will make you stand out, what will make you memorable, you know, what will people remember you for. And sometimes it's that thing that is that little bit different that people will remember. I know for myself, it's often the fact that my mom is Dutch, and that I speak Dutch, that people tend to remember those kind of things. You know, so it's a case of that hook, that memory magnet that people will remember you for. And again, it's what a few other people can duplicate. So again, it's that difference. And also then thinking about what is it that I have that is relevant to the particular audience. You do need to target this, you know, to the particular audience in question, and that it's going to be relevant to what it is they want to hear. And I'm going to go through an example now shortly. So if you're you know, I suppose, look, this isn't becoming quite clear, you don't know exactly what I'm talking about, don't worry, I'm going to take you through that now very shortly. And then it's looking at how you can get maximum benefit from the unique selling points that you have. You know, so making sure that you're benefiting from those skills, the experience, and those qualities, and they're standing to you and helping you to drive your career forward. So as I said, an example. So I drafted this example from a coaching session that I had with a member in the last couple of weeks, where we were looking at his skill set and how he might leverage those skills, how he might position himself in the marketplace and get, I suppose, the edge over others in the marketplace, because he felt that his career had stagnated. He wanted to drive it forward. So when we looked at it, it came to the conclusion that he had a really interesting combination of skills. So he had the strong general financial analysis skills. He'd done a lot of work in that kind of FP&A space, analyzing figures, crunching the numbers. He was also really very strong in terms of IT systems. He'd looked at ways in which to kind of improve systems, enhance systems, and then he had also he was very strong in terms of extracting that data and plugging it in for analysis. So again, that was a key skill. And combined with this, then he had very strong interpersonal skills. He had the ability to be able to deal with non-finance people, to explain the story behind the numbers as it was. So those skills combined enabled him to be able to tell the story behind the numbers, build relationships, not just within finance, but also external to finance. And the relevance of this within the organizational context was that it gave him the ability to be able to broaden his understanding of business, improve processes, and then improve communications, relationships, and ultimately the profits of the organization as well. So really, how he could then maximize these unique selling points was in terms of bringing that to life in a role such as a financial planning and analysis role or a business partnering role. So not only did we identify his unique selling points, we were able to put those together in a personal brand statement. We were able to then identify how he could make a difference in terms of the organization and the benefits to the organization of the skill set that he had. We could show how it was relevant, and we were also able to show then, you know, look at the type of roles and career direction he could take that would help him to maximize the skills and experience. And from those pointers, then he was able to put together a personal brand statement that he could stand over, but that was also going to help him to take the career path that he now wanted. So it was a very useful exercise that we went through. So the next part of managing your personal brand is around presentation. And this takes the form of I suppose kind of a number of different aspects. So obviously there's the kind of your appearance, your dress, what I suppose your dress code, and how you present yourself on a day-to-day basis. And I suppose there's a thought process out there where they say, look, you should be dressing for the role that you want. So you need to be looking at the level above you. How are they dressing? So is it a case that they're in a shirt and tie or a jacket? What is it, what is the image that you want to present? And when we're looking at that role that you want, then that next step of your career, and how your dress code and presentation will fit into that as well. Another consideration might be, or in terms of your workspace, what does that say? When people approach your desk, what is the image that presents to them? Also, as well, looking at your communication or management style, what does that say about you? So when you're interacting with people, you're meeting people, you're attending meetings, what image are you presenting? What brand message are you sending in terms of your communication style? So take some time to think about how your message is landing. What impact is that message having on people? And again, this is a good one to get feedback from others on in terms of how your message is landing. The area that is more difficult then to consider and I suppose to measure is around your behaviors and your body language. And it's one that we would spend a lot of time working with members on, particularly in terms of their in interview. So things like, the way they're sitting, are they slouched in the chair? So are you going to meetings slouching in a chair? Are you sitting up? Do you look interested in the conversation that's going on? Or are you staring out the window, for example? Are you rolling your eyes to heaven? And other behaviors that can sometimes present the wrong image or the wrong brand. Are you defensive, for example? And when people approach you, how do you respond? So it's all of those things in terms of looking at that, and how your behaviors and your body language are impacting on your brand. And again, looking for feedback from others around these areas is important as well. So the other areas then is looking at your CV. So when your CV is being reviewed by HR professionals or recruitment agencies, what does your CV say about you? For example, if there's a lot of information crammed into a page, there's no real structure to it. What image is that presenting to the person reading the CV, as opposed to a CV that is well structured? It's concise, the message is clear. That's obviously going to create a much stronger initial impression. So it is important that you look at that and say, right, if somebody is reading the CV, what are going to be their initial reactions, or what is going to be their initial response to the CV? Likewise, with your LinkedIn profile, it's really important to make sure that is supporting the brand and supporting the message that you want to put out there in terms of the language that you're using and the details that you're putting in there, and also then as well, just your photograph, and that you're making sure that the photograph that you have on your LinkedIn profile is doing you justice, that it is professional. I have seen examples of photographs on LinkedIn that would be better placed on Facebook because they relate more to a personal scenario or personal photograph, maybe from a birthday party or something. Really what you need is a headshot photograph that is that professional image. So it's really looking at that. The other element of your LinkedIn profile that is important in terms of the image that it presents is your activity levels on it. If you're not active on LinkedIn, that shows that you're not too interested in being out there or presenting your personal brand into in the market. Also, as well, if you don't have very many connections on LinkedIn, it would give me the sense that, look, you're not particularly focused on networking, you're not well connected. Also, as well, I think if you join groups or follow particular companies, that is a good way of demonstrating the areas that you're interested in, by joining groups that are relevant to your area of expertise, can show, your interest and your genuine interest in following the developments in those particular areas. And also then it gives you the opportunity to contribute to those particular groups as well. So it is important to consider those particular areas as well. So the next part of the area of managing your brand is around the relationships that you have and the network that you have. So you need to look at, who are your main stakeholders. So what I mean by that is, who are the people that you engage with on a day-to-day basis? Who are the people that have an interest in what it is that you're doing? And so that could be your boss, it could be your boss's boss, it could be the board of directors within the organization. So you need to know and really study who they are. Who are the people that are going to have a say in your career, and who will have a say in relation to decisions that are being made that will potentially impact your career. So you need to know who those stakeholders are. You need to have a good relationship, good, strong working relationship with them, and they need to know who you are. They need to know about your brand. They need to know about the skills, the competencies, etc., that you bring to the organization. And then likewise, then in terms of your network, who is in your network? And look at that from the perspective of the decision makers within that network. What level are those is that network at? If you look at your network, is it made up just of your peers, or are there more senior level people in that network that will have the opportunity or will be well positioned to be able to promote your brand for you at the next level up? So it's really important to break down that network and see who's in that network, what it consists of, how you can leverage that network, and how those people in your network perceive you. What do they say about you? And then look at ways in which you can improve what it is they're saying about you, and that they're advocates for you, that they're willing to support you, promote you, and have the I suppose they're armed with that knowledge of the skills, experience, and attributes that you can bring to the table. You also then need to look, as I said, at the network and who's in that and where the gaps are. And a good way to look at that is actually to plot it out and look at it from the perspective of the different areas. From my own experience of working with members in this area, where I often find the gaps exist is in terms of non-finance professionals. So often, I suppose, which is understandable if you're working within the finance area, it's easier to build networks within that kind of finance accounting area. But what is important is to make sure that you're broadening that network, that it includes non-finances as well, and particularly then as you're developing your career, you do need to broaden out that network of non-finance contacts as well. So that's what I mean about identifying the gaps, trying to bridge and fill those gaps, and then expanding that network so that you have the channels through which to market and promote your personal brand, because there's no point in having that brand there if you can't push that out and promote it, and that people aren't aware of it and aren't willing to kind of promote it for you. So it's really, really important that you have that network, and your relationships with that network are such that they are willing to promote your brand and are saying the right things and the things that you want them to say. So that's really, really important. So in terms of top tips then, just to kind of as I suppose a recap, it's really important that you take control and manage your brand. Don't leave it to chance, and certainly don't leave others to do that for you. You need to be in control of that. You need to know what it is that you want to present to people, what you want people to be saying about you, and be authentic. Don't be afraid to be yourself, and don't be afraid to put out there what it is that you feel you're good at, and be able to stand over that, and that will give you confidence too. If you're confident and you're authentic in terms of the message that you're putting out there, it's going to be so much easier to feel comfortable in that space and feel like you can go out there and be authentic and to promote that brand. Also be very clear in terms of what it is you want to say. What is the message, and what is your objective, and why is it that you're going down this particular road? So what is it you want to get from it? Be clear in terms of that message, and then identify and target the right audience. So who do you want to connect with? Who is it that you want to know about your personal brand. So you're thinking about this in terms of your career strategy, you know, so who are the right audiences there? Who are the decision makers in terms of your career? You might be looking to move into a new area or look for a new job. So, you know, look at that and say, well, where is my target audience here? Is it employers? Is it the recruitment agencies? So be very clear in terms of identifying the right audience. As I mentioned earlier, it's building that network, and that's something you need to be doing as you're going through your career anyway. And just building that out, building on it all of the time, because you will find as your career progresses, you'll become increasingly dependent on your network in terms of finding that next career move. And it's also a nice resource to have there that you can tap into it for advice, support, guidance. So it is really, really important. It's obviously all about getting your message out there, and it's something that you need to do on a continuous basis. Keep working on it, keep evolving that message as your career advances. You know, look at it and say, is this message still relevant? Is this the message that I still want to get out there? And it's making sure that, you know, there may be times when you need to reinvent and look at your messaging from a slightly different context. So it's important that you do that. So we're coming towards the end of the webinar. I hope you found it useful. I just a couple of other pointers to kind of go through, but if now is your chance, if you've any questions or any points that you'd like to add or any suggestions, please send through. I'm just looking at the chat here. I haven't heard from anybody just yet, but it's not too late. So do feel free to send through a question. So just by way of a recap, so what we've done is we've defined your personal brand and the benefits that it will have for you. Hopefully I've convinced you that it is important. I've shown you what a personal brand actually means. I've demonstrated to you how you can create that and how you can develop that brand. And then also I've explained to you how you will, you know, the steps to managing that brand and how important it is to actually manage that brand, because your brand will have a major impact on your career path and your career progression. So it certainly is worth spending time on. It will take time, but it's certainly, you know, it's something that will reap rewards and will pay dividends for you. So I have a question here that just came up on the screen, and it's one in terms of downloading the slides. So what I'm going to do is I'll speak to one of my colleagues, and we'll get those slides to you. Another comment here as well, that's given you plenty of food for thought, which is great to hear. I know I've covered quite a lot, but if you do need support in this particular area, myself and my team here in Chartered Accountants Ireland are available to help you in terms of developing your personal brand and advice in relation to the areas of coaching, career coaching, and developing your career in general. So feel free to drop us an email or give me a call. Thank you very much for joining me here. I have a nice message up here from somebody to say, look, thank you very much for the webinar. It's given them several ideas, and it's been very, very useful and very much appreciated. So I'm delighted to hear that it has been of use and benefit. And thank you so much for joining me here today. We will have 2 other webinars coming up over the next couple of months. One around recruitment and retention, which is more for the employer side, but also we're going to be zoning in on mentoring and the importance of finding a career mentor for you, so we can certainly help in that sense. Thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.